Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome to another museum FAQ conversation. I'm Paul Orselli, President and Chief Instigator at POW, Paul Orselli Workshop, here on Long Island. Although I stole my sort of thematically related background, the Huntington Museum offered a Zoom background, and I thought, oh, we're going to be talking about the environment and climate, so I put that as my background. I'm delighted to be joined today by Stephanie Ratcliffe. And Stephanie, I always like to start out by having people tell us a little bit about their background before we launch into the main part of the conversation. So with that build up, if you could tell us a little bit about sort of how you got to where you are now, that would be great. And then we'll talk about the main event.
Well, hi, Paul, and thank you for the invitation. This will be fun. It's been fun to watch a couple of your other of these, so this will be fun. So I kind of had this idea that I wanted to work in a museum. I had a children's museum in my neighborhood in West Virginia, Charleston, West Virginia, and I think the idea was planted. So honestly, I didn't even know what that meant. Went through undergrad, kind of made up my own major that said I was going to be in museum management, honestly making it up as I went along. And then was lucky enough to get one of those great internships at the Smithsonian that gave me this overview, and went on to grad school. And then I really began to understand what it meant when I had a wonderful opportunity at the Brooklyn Children's Museum. I was there during a time of a real creative resurgence. In the mid to late mid 80s, and it was just a wonderful group of professionals that I've still stayed in contact today. And we were reinventing the place after sort of a period of stagnant time for that organization, and it was just a wonderful place to like really think deeply. And the other thing I really loved about the beginning of in a children's museum, it really grounded you in a really wonderful way about, you know, the way that kids think and what they need, but also that sort of family relationship that is so interesting that we get to play with in museums. And then from there, I went to the Maryland Science Center for 13 years. And that was another great place to play and just kind of reinvent everything on the floor there over time. And then to the Wild Center where I am now. And I'm starting my 18th year. I was on the startup team, and it was, it was being on the startup team. You just can't, it's just such a wonderful opportunity. And I just feel very proud of what we were able to do. It's kind of a mix of a museum of, if you're not familiar with it, we have a large campus, 115 acres. We have an indoor experience with a lot of live animals, and then an outdoor experience and an elevated walkway. So what I really loved about the Wild Center, which made it different than all my other experiences with museums, is that it was place-based. And so as someone who comes from exhibits and interpretation, it was this chance, you know, where science museums and a lot of museums are encyclopedic. This gave you a chance to stay in one place and then go deep into that place. And so I found it as a really interesting kind of interpretive challenge that was going to be fun to play with.
Well, and one of my favorite things about your museum, since it is way up in the northern part of New York in the Adirondacks, is if you go there during the winter time, you can get snowshoes to walk around, which I think is great. So, and actually that's very apropos, the fact that the Wild Center is very much a place-based museum, and that you have significant outdoor resources and assets. And you are an organization that is attuned for lots of reasons to the environment and the broader issues of climate change, which is what I'd like to talk about today. So I'm wondering if maybe the way that we can frame this conversation, or at least start this conversation, is maybe you can highlight some of the things that as an organization have happened at the Wild Center. And maybe as you highlight some of those examples of programs, and I know some of them are even international programs. If you can highlight some takeaways or some things to watch out for people watching this video who might be interested in incorporating or dealing programmatically with issues of the environment and more broadly climate change. So that's a big meaty meatball I've thrown over to your side of the net, but you're up to the task, I'm sure. So.
Well, I think one of the things that I think that the Wild Center, in some ways we were kind of backed into a corner into doing this because we had just opened this brand new museum. When you open a museum, the storyline has been in play for anywhere from 7 to 5 years. And so it's kind of hard to turn that ship, but within a year of opening and clearly as the new science museum in the region, we had to do something about climate change. We had no more exhibit space, which, I'm an exhibit person, so you would see it was very kind of a natural place to go, but it didn't feel right. It was just, how could we come and have a conversation around climate change? And there was an issue also that I don't think is particular to us, but it's really heightened where we are in the Adirondacks, in which there are a lot of advocacy groups that continue to advocate for the environment. And we are very much an educational organization and not an advocacy organization. So how could we, in an environment which is still present today, that there's been a successful sort of counter-information campaign in which a scientific topic has been made into something which is into a political conversation, when in fact it's a science conversation. But that doesn't mean that we can ignore it. That is the sort of environment in which we have to work. But one of the things we did early on is to convene several, whether it was a group of sort of scientific leaders was our first convening. Then we had adult convenings, and then we had one of our most successful models is convenings of youth. And what it was important for us to do is not be prescriptive. And I think that a lot of science museums have been sort of slow to the climate change conversation because they couldn't quite figure out how to navigate that space. How does it not appear to be political and stay in the sciences? And so through trial, did we get it right from out of the gate? I think we had the main idea right, but of course, any good prototyper, you sort of evolve in your technique, but bringing science to the table, sharing the science, having scientists share the science, and then constructing conversations within community members or within youth or with youth and their school administrators or whatever. What we became really good at is framing the conversation, bringing science to the table, and then framing it in such a way that people were asking them what they were sort of making either their own personal climate action plans or they were trying to figure out what they could do to take action. And so it was a self-defined action, and it wasn't a conversation. We have this sort of cardinal rule in our museum where we never say you should. So we're not in the you should business. It's really, and if you think about how anyone learns and how there is a commitment to action, it really is the strongest way. If they've come to the conclusion themselves at exactly what they want to do, and we all have different skill sets, right? The whole world needs to shift and change. So whatever your set of skills are, you need to kind of create how you can make a difference in this particular instance. So the way we frame it, the way we construct these conversations, these are not 1-hour programs. Our youth summits are up to 2 days. We have a 1-day conference for contractors and in that case, that's a very particular audience where we said, how can we help the contractors in our area make sure that they are, they're kind of the gatekeepers for information in terms of, whether somebody wants to put in a heat pump or a solar panel, they can be the gatekeeper. And if they're not up on how to integrate the new green technology into their business, then we've lost an opportunity. So that was a case where we just kind of took one group of people that we wanted to reach and then figure out the way that we sort of help them kind of help themselves and be part of the movement in a way that made sense within their context. So it really is, and I guess for me as an old exhibit person, the programmatic inspiration that the convening of the conversation and becoming conveners and facilitators of conversation is not something I had a lot of experience, or a lot of us did, but it has so much potential. And, as trusted organizations, for someone to sort of come into that kind of new format for us, I think it's just, we're so ripe to do it. It is a new skill set. I'm not going to say that it's not. You do have to be thoughtful, but all that thoughtful work comes way before the event happens. And we're all smart, creative people, and we know how people learn. So I think that's the sort of thing that we can add to our, in our museum world, is really kind of diving in with both feet, with using different techniques to try to move this conversation forward in the climate world. So I'll stop there.
No, I just, well, first off, I'll just mention that, in my opinion, the very best directors were all exhibits people first. So I'll just say that. But I just had, I appreciate you sharing that this, to engage with conversations with all sorts of people, and not to be prescriptive, not to be a you should type organization, can obviously be difficult. I think I had two questions for you. One is, are there resources or people or organizations that were helpful to you as you convened conversations? That's one question. And the other question is, I think a lot of museums are, I'm going to say, afraid that they're going to upset people, or that people will push back hard on the museum for even bringing up a topic like climate change. And so I'm wondering how, in both those questions, resources, but also how you dealt with this. And I mean, I understand it's an institutional concern. Nobody wants to set up a program where people are yelling at them. So I wonder if you could touch on both of those topics, because I often hear our colleagues bring up variations like, I don't even know where to start with this, or I'm really afraid that if we don't appear completely neutral, by the way, hashtag museums are not neutral, how to deal with both of those aspects.
So I would say that we did have to, again, we started, well, one thing I will say, out of the gate, we had the board's 100% backing that this is a science conversation and not a political one. So I gotta say that we were ahead of so we had that was really not the issue. Have we had some difficult conversations? Yes. Are we so committed that this is something that, as a science museum, that we need to talk about? Absolutely. So I think that the convention, the sort of full, from top to bottom, the organization has to work through it. So you might have to do some, just like this current conversations we're all having about equity, you might have to do a lot of internal conversations first within the organization to go out there. But it's actually not there. If you put yourself in the place of bringing in some outside experts with you, just because you bring in an outside expert to stimulate different conversations, and if you're structuring an entire day of conversations, there's lots of ways to not get so nervous that you are going to offend someone. But did we lose a couple of donors along the way? Absolutely, because they could not see past what we were doing. But that's what we had the conviction. And so I think the way in which, what we've really proven on the other, if someone was skeptical, the way in which we have done it has proven that we are listening, that it's a conversation. Come and share your ideas. It's an open forum. It's that kind of welcoming construct that I think takes that sort of political edge off of it. So nothing that we do has the political edges that you might see. But I think it's a top to bottom. But I also think that, you know, you got to jump in there and go with both feet. And the best way to do it is just to give it a try. And if the first thing you try is 2 hours long, then that's what it is. I mean, some other museums have tried convening formats for other topics. You know, whether it's addiction, there's other topics that you could try it with, if climate change, and then work up to climate change. I think that, but I think that it is a different skill set. I'm not saying that it's not. And I will say that as we went forward, we often also hire outside facilitators for some of those internal room conversations. So things are carefully constructed, and we do hire outside help because our staff is kind of, their skill sets are in other ways, and there's nothing wrong with that. We partner with people all the time. I would say that in terms of resources, the International Sites of Consciousness has been a real inspiration. We are still working on the very deep conversations that they've been able to construct with smaller groups of people. We are still in the learning phase for that, for some of those sort of deeper, more difficult conversations. So we're still in a learning mode, but we have learned a lot. And we did actually, you know, we have a toolkit for our Youth Climate Summit, and we have funding in which we are committed to help other people if they want to construct a Youth Climate Summit. We have a toolkit that we share out. It's on our website, and then a lot of those resources about how to do this are listed there. There's probably too many to go into, but we are there to help. And I think that what is really inspiring is to work with youth. You know, they do not have some of these constructs that maybe are holding back some of the adults. I mean, it's a passion. You see kids from all different backgrounds, and they really understand the shift that needs to happen at all levels. And so you will have someone who, you know, from the arts, or someone who's an engineer. They all are working together, and they all are thinking about it in different ways, and they're also very inspired by each other. So I would say, if you're going to start anywhere, start with the youth, because you will be you can't not do the work after you see the passion, and we need to be allies for the work they have ahead. That's the truth.
Yeah, obviously young people have long-term skin in the game. They have a long-term interest in what's happening and what's going to happen, maybe even more so than some adults. But just since you mentioned resources and the toolkit and International Sites of Conscious, we will, as they say in every good YouTube video, we will include resources in the description down below. So we'll make sure that those resources show up so that people can get more information about the stuff we talked about. You know, Stephanie, maybe a good way to sort of tie this together is, since you mentioned several times the youth summits that you've done, is maybe just to talk a little bit about some examples, some of the youth summits that you've done, a little bit of the framework of that, and what were some of the additional takeaways or learnings that you took away from those experiences, how your organization was involved, how were they convened, you know, just in broad strokes. We'll include the resources, of course, but I just think it would be interesting for people to hear. And I know, if I'm recollecting correctly, you've done some that have an international dimension as well. So
yes, sure. So the whole thing started because we had we had created a climate summit for adults in the Adirondack region, and there was a group of high school students that came to that, and they said, "Hey, we need one for us. Do one just for us." And Jen Kretzer, who is the head of the program at the Wild Center, she had worked with youth a lot, and one of the things that she brought in from literally day one, which was they were going to help co-create what that meant. This was not the adults creating yet another program and what they thought, that it was actually co-created. So I think our sort of secret sauce, so to speak, that what happens and what we recommend, which is critical to anyone who wants to start a summit, and we have different sort of different formats that we have learned that really work, which I'll go into in a second, but really having that core group of it can be anywhere from 5 to 15 people. We had students from the 3 towns that came together. They meet for several months before the summit actually happens, and then they go back to their school. So the whole idea is there's a group of students that help create the content and advise on the content and how they want to, the topics that they want to go into. Then there is a 2-day summit. And then during those 2 days, it is a mixture of workshops. And again, we're not being prescriptive, but it's like, come and learn about this. And this is something you could do or not do. It's up to you. They work as teams. They come with their administrators, but the students work together. They craft a climate action plan for their school. So the first day is a lot of workshops and a lot of content and understanding the urgency of the issue, and then working as a team collaboratively coming up and creating a climate action plan. Then they go back to their schools and they have the rest of the school year to figure out how to bring their peers along. And what I think is so beautiful about the way that this has been working and what we've seen, a lot of these early youth climate students are now deep into their careers, and we've seen that change people's trajectory of what they want to do, and they start them in their colleges. So it really is, if you think about how much time a student they're in school as much or if more than they are at home, and this is one of their first relationships with an organization, their school. And so they have to, when they have an idea, work through, get their peers on, come up with a plan, raise money if that's part of it, to work through with the administrators to get this work done. And this is exactly what we need to happen when they go into the workplace. Like, they can see the world shift because they've already shifted their world. When they see their entire doing something to be able to shift the behavior of their entire student body, whatever the project might be, it's really, really, really powerful. And so this what we put in the toolkit are these sort of the skeleton of how this process works. And so we had some interest in our friends at Herika in Finland. They did a youth summit. They actually did it with a little bit of a younger group in the junior high level, and we've done that several. We are working now with a group in the Catskills in Brooklyn. We've gone internationally to Sri Lanka. I mean, we have the format is translatable, and again, the secret sauce of the students being the core, and and a lot of what we've learned at the Wild Center, it is this relinquishing of the power, being in control of, and really embracing the co-creation piece of it. Of course, we're good at logistics and trying to figure out how the actual thing gets done in service to the kids. So I think that it's a power shift, and the sharing of the power, that is all the pieces that really sort of make this, make it work. And what we found, because you have the students involved, there was one in Detroit, and the issues that are in the wilds, they're in the Adirondacks, where the kids are very motivated by the loss of the winter, and they're not going to be able to ski, and their winter is, that is really motivating to them to do something about climate change, because they can see what a loss it's going to be in their world. In Detroit, we learned that the students that we worked with there were deeply cared about the effect of asthma. There was at least someone in everyone's family that had an issue with asthma, and that this was related to climate change. So it is a structure and a template that then allows the students to put on whatever passion they bring to the conversation. And we know that it's all interrelated. And so it's we've had classes up here. They've done, we're on our 11th year. And so it just gets reinvented every year by the group of students that are a part of it.
Wow, I love a model and a framework that is flexible and lends itself to co-creation, but then has practical outcomes and things that people are deriving from that framework. So that's awesome. Also, that's cool. As somebody born and raised in Detroit, every time somebody mentions Detroit, I perk up. There's a positive thing. That's nice. Well, Stephanie, I think I know we just barely scratched the surface of the work that you've been doing and the work that other people, our museum colleagues, could be doing on this topic, a really essential topic. But as I mentioned, we will, of course, include more information and resources and maybe ways for people to reach out to you and your staff if they want more information. I, uh, I hope to be able to come visit you in person sometime when not in the middle of the frozen winter, although I did enjoy those snowshoes, but to come and enjoy the outdoor aspects at another season too. I'll look forward to that hopefully soon. So
You're welcome anytime.
thank you. I appreciate you taking the time today, and I think there were some really good takeaways, and I know there will be good resources for people to follow up, like I say, on this really what is an essential topic. So thanks very much.
Well, thank you for doing this for us, Paul. This is great. Appreciate it.